I imagine, is my understanding of, uh, n- sentient non-human beings, that can anger them or piss them off, if you will, because that's kind of where they live. They live in these, water streams or whatever. Those streams are sacred to them or something to that effect. And so after I did that, I'm pretty sure I did that, but I'm positive after that, up above, further up, these two white orbs kind of just manifested out of nowhere and started shooting, like boop boop boop, kind of like shooted in and out of each other, like two kind of manifested, and they kind of pulsated, going in and out of each other, like back and forth really quickly. And I hadn't seen anyone come down the mountain or on the trail. It's 8 p.m. It's getting dark. I don't know why anyone would be coming down from the top of the mountain if they were mountaineering at this hour, or why they would be up there. And I immediately got terrified.
Yes, and many children see them too. About 75% of the world's children today are being born with etheric vision. And when your children talk with people and have daydream playmates, the chances are they are actually speaking to some of these people. Because these angels or angelic forces, or nature spirits as they're often called, will often make themselves seen.
And all of a sudden I hear him go, whoa, or, something like that. So I look up, and as I look up, I see this thing.
And I said, I've never seen a butterfly like you before.
I know that the paranormal is real. Listen.
As soon as I spoke to it, it turns around and makes eye contact with me. And then it stands upright.
And it was at that moment that I saw it was like an orange light appear above this row of trees. And from this sort of orange light, this thing appeared. Its wings were actually like sycamore leaf shaped.
And I started talking to them. I'm like, hi, are y'all the dwarves? And I would hear whispers that would say, hi, yeah, you want to play? And it wasn't just my imagination. And I had told them, I'm like, my dwarves, they like beer, And my dad's like, yeah, sure, your dwarves like beer. And they were holding a conversation, and his beer slid upwards instead of downwards, how the house was tilted. And him and my brothers jumped up.
So I stopped calling out Adam, and I'm just kind of, my mind draws a blank, and I stop behind that tree stump. I'm pretty close to it now because I took a few steps forward, and I see this thing.
Welcome everybody tonight to Fascinating Fae. Tonight we're traveling to Austin, Texas to talk with William. William, how are things going in Austin tonight?
Pretty good here. Yeah, a little warm for November, but otherwise they're great.
Well, Texas gets pretty cold in the winter, so take it when you can get it.
Yeah.
My favorite joke to make is that every podcast ever starts talking about the weather, so we've checked that box.
Nice.
It's also warm where I am because I'm currently in Costa Rica. William, what I'll do here for approximately a minute is I'll just introduce you to the bumpers on the bowling alley that we use here at Fascinating Fae to create comfortable conversations. I have these rules, but there's not like really rules. It's just the way that I do things. So the first thing I'd like to say to guests is we are not here to convince anybody of anything. That's kind of rule number one.
Right.
No worries about convincing me or the audience. I'm just here to hear what happened. Number two, I do really think it is brave to come on the show, and I like to tell people that I think they're brave to come on the show at the start. So thank you for coming. Thanks for, agreeing to talk and making the time out of your day. I certainly appreciate it, and I know that the audience listening appreciates it as well. And then finally, I just like to let people know that usually the way that I do things here is I let the guest build context and just sort of ease us into any and all storytelling that they're comfortable with. It's okay if you jump around. It's okay if you go chronologically. There's really no format that's correct other than just to let you kind of let us understand it the way that you did as best as possible.
Yeah.
So for that reason, I generally speaking don't interrupt my guests when they're talking. Don't worry if that feels like I'm just being quiet, because I am. And if you have a question or there's a natural point in your storytelling where I should jump in, I'll pick up on that, and I won't leave you hanging there.
Yeah.
But I don't want to interrupt you. I don't like it when interviewers do that. So I just like to create a space for people to have a chance to speak uninterrupted about what occurred. And when you finish, I like to ask questions based on my curiosity, and that's pretty much the format of the show. So, with all that said, and again, a big thanks for being here, what I'll ask you to do, William, is just for myself and for the audience listening, if you'd be so kind, just kind of walk us into your experiences with fairies as you understand it and other related experiences, and just sort of take us there, if you would be so kind.
Yeah, absolutely. So around 2018, my girlfriend and I moved to San Francisco, and ended up living there for 2.5 years. And during that time, I'm not sure exactly what piece of information slipped into my ecosystem, but I started hearing or started reading about this place up in Northern California, about 2.5-3 hours north of San Francisco, where we're living, called Mount Shasta, and then kind of started investigating the lore around it, being someone who's always kind of been interested in the paranormal and those sort of matters. Started reading about the lore of the mountain and J.C. Brown and the I Am activity cult that was established in the 1930s that funny is still around there today, and the mythologies of the place, from that the Native Americans have, or that the white colonialists had established after moving into the area. So it kind of piqued my ears and my interest, and then eventually got the nerve up to just travel up there, go check it out, go see if I can get to the bottom of it, see what it's all about. So I ended up going up there about 3 times during my tenure in San Francisco. I haven't been back since, but I've always keep fantasizing every year to make a trip back up there and spend a few more days on the mountain to see if I can get any more information, if you will, about it. So yeah, subsequently traveled up there 3 times and ended up camping on the mountain. Interestingly enough, when you pull into the town, the banners, I guess the city slogan has a picture of the mountain, and I guess their city slogan is Mount Shasta, where heaven meets earth. And like Sedona and probably another place that I'm unfamiliar with, the whole town is just riddled with New Age people, New Age cultists like the I Am activity people, or different splinter groups from that, or what have you, or there's a Buddhist center there, a Christian monastery center, but that's a very small population. It's mostly New Age people. And if you just walk down the main drag of the Mount Shasta city, every other store is some sort of crystal store, with crystal skulls and Tibetan singing bowls and unfortunately kind of right-wing New Age literature about stuff. And that's a whole nother story, the intersection between right-wing and New Age people. But nevertheless, the town is a very New Age, the culture in the town is a very New Age place. But I often tell people, even if you stripped out all of the culture, the people, the shops around it, you took all of that away, just traveling around on the mountain and around the mountain has all of these new age signifiers. Like there's this place called Fairy Falls. It's just like the beautiful waterfalls, just not on the mountain, but outside the mountain that you can go check out. And there's McLeod Falls on the other side of the mountain. There's all these like springs that are coming out of the mountain, like the headwaters to the Sacramento River are there, and all this spring water, you can just sip it right out of the ground. They call it, Lemurian water, for lack of a better description. So yeah, I find that really, someone who's kind of anthropologically interested in New Age culture. I'm not a New Age person, but I just think it's an interesting, subject matter to look at from a distance. Yeah, the mountain and the surrounding area of the mountain has all these new age signifiers of waterfalls and springs and these kind of flowers, and there's this purple kind of halo around the mountain at the sunset hours, and it's a fascinating place culturally because there's so many people that are locked into a particular narrative of what's going on there. They think they know, but they clearly don't. But nevertheless, amidst all these true believers and, the ascended masters or Lemurians or Saint Germain, of the Ion activity called blah, blah, blah. Nevertheless, there is just so much paranormal activity that happens there, from UFO sightings to people seeing some of these, quote, what they would read as Lemurian beings, to the most popular thing that my anecdotal research has yielded is people seeing like orbs of light around there, and that is kind of what I primarily experienced during my time there. I'll go into a few of my anecdotal accounts of these orbs, which, from my perspective and my kind of, reading or understanding after the fact that it happened, were most likely fae or fairies. So, just when like walking around the mountain from up on Bunny Flat or around Panther Meadows, you'll just like, personally, I just noticed all these sort of just funny sort of rock formations. Like all these rocks they could have been lined up by humans. They could have not been. I'm not sure, but yeah, it's kind of just the way certain rocks were arranged around flowers, or they would just be arranged in kind of like a motif that would be kind of like alert your senses or like, check that out or whatever. So just walking around the mountain, literally on the mountain through the trails up above Bunny Flat trailhead or around Panther Meadows or the old ski bowls, like your eye will just come upon like these, just like a interesting puddle of water, or a rock formation that seemed kind of indicative of like, a fairy kind of gleaning that or making that a little special zone over there. So just kind of walking around the mountain, I think my experience was kind of primed, or I don't know, maybe this phenomena was talking to me or communicating to me through the signs that, it's possibly, I'm not sure, designed in the landscape, or whatever. So, what I'll just go into some of these orb / fairy encounters that I had. And they were mostly happen like around either, interestingly, looking back on it, like the crepuscular hour, like when, day is turning into night, that kind of median liminal zone, or when night is turning into morning. So I guess, between 6 and 7 or 7 and 8 p.m., depending on your time zone, and like 3 to 4 a.m. Is when I've seen these orbs are actually gotten close to, orbs / fairies are actually gotten close to one. So yeah, moving through up above the Bunny Flat trailhead is, just a forest kind of at the base of the mountain, kind of to the corner of my eye, I caught these little white things just kind of floating around in this dragonfly fashion, just around the forest. But, obviously being too terrified to approach them, I kind of just like kept moving and acknowledged it, through the corner of my eyes, like, oh, that's interesting. That kind of seems like it could be like a fairy sort of phenomenon over there. Again, they're kind of white, just small, about the size of your, like a ping pong ball or something, off in the forest there. But yeah, it didn't. My understanding of the fairy fae phenomenon is that, there's kind of specific protocols for approaching them or interacting with them. And I didn't feel like I was necessarily equipped with those to, not have a bad or sort of cursed interaction with them in that moment. So yeah, that was my first encounter with them. And then a second encounter was around the same area. So if you leave the Bunny Flat trailhead from there, you can, if you're, mountaineering and trying to get to the top of the mountain, the trail goes all the way to the top there. So on another night I moved, there was, it was about 7 p.m. I was hiking up above the forest where I had the first encounter. The tree line ends right there, and then it gets, kind of shale rock or whatever. I was just moving up there, just seeing what I could see, and then I looked down into the forest. It was this crepuscular hour when day is turning into night. You see all these little white orbs, moving around in the forest down below me, where I had that other encounter kind of out of the side of my eye or whatever that I walked past earlier. And then I look above to the top. Well, I guess I'll back up a little bit. So I was above the tree line, kind of not midway, but just a little bit above the mountain. And as far as I can remember, there was a stream up there, just a stream kind of popping out of a rock. And I think I urinated near that stream, which I imagine is my understanding of, sentient non-human beings that can anger them or piss them off, if you will, because that's kind of where they live. They live in these, water streams or whatever. Those streams are sacred to them or something to that effect. And so after I did that, I'm pretty sure I did that, but I'm positive after that, further up, these two white orbs kind of just manifested out of nowhere and started shooting, like boop, 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 kind of like shooted in and out of each other. Like two kind of manifested, and they kind of pulsated going in and out of each other, like back and forth really quickly. And I hadn't seen anyone come down the mountain or on the trail. It's 8 p.m. It's getting dark. I don't know why anyone would be coming down from the top of the mountain if they were mountaineering at this hour, or why they would be up there. And I immediately got terrified after I saw these white orbs kind of shooting back and forth out of each other, and then started, floating around. So I started barreling down the trail, like in a terrified fashion, like I got to get the hell out of here. And I kept going down the trail again. He kept looking behind me. I was like, oh shit, they're still behind me, these like orbs or whatever. They go back down, keep moving down through the forest, and I keep looking back, and they're still behind me, bumbling along. And then I finally get back down to the parking lot where the cars are, and I'm like, okay, I'm safe. I'm back where other people are. And it finally comes down, and it just appears like it's just whatever these orbs ended up being two hikers who got in their car immediately and then drove off. Could have been two hikers at the top. I'm not sure, but I don't see how they, with headlamps on, but my reason tells me that would be weird for them to be shooting, in and out of each other, the headlamp light to be shooting in and out of each other like this or whatever. So, it could have well been that I was, experienced a sort of glamoring, or I don't know the exact mechanics of it, sort of like a reality shifting, a shift in your particular subjective perceptual field, where they could have been these trickster fairy fae orbs and then kind of turned in and then manifested in my reality as these hikers getting into this car and then driving off. Who knows? I didn't ask anyone else if they saw these hikers. So these two hikers manifested in my perception It turned out, apparently my senses told me that these were trying to tell me that, oh, these two orbs that were doing all of this weird stuff at the top of the mountain just ended up being two hikers with headlamps on. But at the same time, my senses are doubting me, about this experience of like, how would these orbs that were shooting back and forth and pulsating out of each other in this kind of very rapid fashion just end up being two hikers, so they're, for the most part, I think that was this first sort of glamoring experience that this phenomenon sort of manifested to me in my perceptual field. But again, there was, probably at 10 o'clock at night by now, so there was just cars parked, that people camping. There's no one to say like, oh, did you see those two hikers with their headlamps on get in their car and drive off? So it's interesting how the phenomenon, my experience up there, there's something that is weird and is happening, but then there's something at the end of it that makes you doubt the experience, whether it happened or not. So that was the I'd say the second experience of the third kind sort of experience I had with this fairy fae phenomenon, Mount Shasta. And I'll go into the third one with this orange orb that occurred on another night at a much later time.
Before you jump into the third and final story, if it's okay with you, I'd love to kind of add a few comments and ask some questions with what you've told me already.
For sure.
First of all, awesome storytelling. I was captivated listening to everything you said. It's interesting that the slogan for the town is where heaven and earth meet. That's kind of like foreboding in a way, or maybe the town knows more than it lets on to, is kind of how that one feels. I've spent a fair amount of time in California. I come from British Columbia originally, so it's pretty much just down, it just cruised through Washington State and Oregon, and you're there. It takes almost, half a day if you really hit it. And so that section of country, like north of San Francisco, is hands down like some of the most beautiful stuff on earth, I would say. And it's trippy because California has like the whole population of Canada is in the state of California. But when you head north out of San Francisco, you get into like basically unbroken coastline and mountains pretty quickly. That's one of the weird things that California has going for it, is there's so much density where there are people that the rest of the place is pretty untouched.
Yeah, it's mostly, a lot of it, if you just look at a map, a significant portion of it is public land.
Yeah, California is pretty awesome. I've got good things to say about my experiences in California. You were mentioning a type of like ascendant master, or I can't remember the word you were using. What are these guys in town called?
Yeah, so there is the I Am activity cult, who, yeah, so they were kind of the forebearers of this mythology that you see in the town at the New Age shops. They'll have different, cards with different pictures of the ascended masters. And I'm not too much of a scholar of this sort of mythology. I think some of it is taken from anthroposophy and the philosophy and ideas of Madame Blavatsky. So it's not totally original, I would say. A lot of it is listed from that late 19th century New Age movement called anthroposophy that M.P. Blavatsky was the founder of. But nevertheless, so there's this mythology that there are these, quote, ascended masters, and Jesus is in this pantheon, and there's about 8 people. I couldn't name them, but they apparently, these sort of light beings, I guess, who are, some of them have been historical figures. One of them is this fellow named Saint Germain, who, if you look him up, very complicated mythology of, there's multiple Saint Germains. Oh, there was this Saint Germain that was involved in this, Italian court, and he was an alchemist, et cetera, and different personages of Saint Germain throughout history. But nevertheless, to nail it down specifically to Mount Shasta, the founder of the I Am activity, who I believe his name is Guy Ballard, he was around the mountain in the 30s, like walking around it, and had a paranormal encounter with this person he claims to be Saint Germain. And he apparently instilled in him the I Am teachings that he subsequently turned into the I Am activity cult. That still has, an office there and a library that you can visit and a pretty decent presence. They still do their weird ceremonies and such things there. It's a little bit, as far as I know, it's a little bit racist and very jingoistic, like very pro America sort of thing. Like America is like the promised land. So it's a weird mix of Christianity and New Ageism and jingoism.
Fascinating. I'm really glad you told me more about that. I'm going to look up this I Am cult when we're done talking, because that was sort of the first I'd heard about it. Okay, so Mount Shasta, I mean, it's up there. We were talking about this a little bit offline. It's certainly up there as one of the more paranormal places in America, which is interesting to me as it relates to, what kind of community has developed around it. Because if you think about like Glastonbury, England, for example, another place where you see a type of new agey community.
Absolutely.
That is place-centric. And I would say there's definitely others out there, but Mount Shasta is on par with Glastonbury in that way.
No doubt.
If this is something to do with ley lines or whatever, it's well beyond my pay grade and knowledge level. But I do find it remarkable that certain places kind of have that going on,
Yeah. Yeah, I would say they're both. I have yet to go to Glastonbury, but yeah, they're definitely. Who knows what is happening at these places, but definitely something is, and some kind of energy or weirdness, or maybe they're just sort of thin. What would they call it, in quotes, thin places. Kind of a more permeable membrane between realities and dimensions, that can manifest all of this strange stuff that happens to people at these places.
I think there's something there, and I mean, to what extent it's related to the fairy subject matter is amorphous, but much like the phenomena of fairies is without concrete definition, it's all comes down to kind of a feeling. But I'll share a brief story with you, since I don't know why Glastonbury came up in my mind there, but it triggered a memory. I had a chance to go to Glastonbury. My father and mother got divorced when I was, I guess, 16, 17. And after I graduated high school, my mother was living with her new husband in Bristol, England. And myself and my younger brother went to visit her, in her new home, in her new country, and we went to Glastonbury. And when we went to Glastonbury, a very remarkable thing happened, which I'm trying to piece through, and I've never mentioned on the show before. But we were in like the town proper, and it's just like you described Mount Shasta. Every other store is a crystal store. Every other store is like some sort of new ageist fringe religion, or
paraphernalia, new age paraphernalia.
Precisely. The incense is burning on the street. You can smell it, et cetera, et cetera. And for whatever reason, we were going into one of these types of shops with curios and antiques and divining rods and things of this nature. And we walked in, and at the time, my younger brother was only 14. And we walk into the store, and immediately the woman walking at the counter just stands up and looks right at my younger brother and says, I've been waiting for you. She marches into the back. She comes out and she brings out this box about the size of a shoebox, but more square.
Yeah.
And she sets it down on the table, and she looks right at him and she says, "Here." And she just pushes this box at him. And he opened it up. My mom and I are just like, what is going on? My younger brother opens up the box, and inside it is a crystal ball. like a, like a glass ball, like a crystal ball, a real crystal ball. And she basically says, I'm tired of hanging on to this for you. This is yours. And he didn't really know what to do. And my mom was like, oh, we're not going to pay for this. Like, she thought maybe it was some sort of scam or something.
Yeah,
or
right. Just trying to get rid of this surplus crystal balls I have.
Yeah, and she maybe does this to everybody, and then that makes them buy it. And no, she was insistent. This is his. Free. Get it out of here, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was weird. And so he took it, and he brought it, with him back home. I'm going to make a really long story short, but he had some serious mental health problems in the subsequent 4 years, ultimately leading to his institutionalization and hospitalization against his will.
Yeah.
Due to a police intervention when he was in an episode of losing control.
Yeah.
And when that happened, his stuff was unattended because he was hospitalized against his will, right? And so one of the responsibilities was to go deal with his apartment.
Right.
And during that process, my mom came across that thing, which he clearly had been using and had out, and she took it into the garage and she smashed it with a hammer. And not that long afterwards, his condition in his sort of catatonic state in hospitalization improved. He was ultimately released, and today he's doing fine.
Wow.
But that was probably one of the weirder standout, fringe, potentially associated to my own story later down the line thing, because I do wonder to what extent a person's perceptive abilities are ancestral. And I wonder to what extent, as a percentage of the population, there are people who are actively suppressing different perceptive abilities. And so, yourself, myself, many others that I speak to, we may be genetically predisposed for experiences.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never thought about that.
I would even go so far, this is again, total conjecture and only anecdotally backed up, but it would appear that perhaps there is bloodlines. I hate this word, bloodlines, because it sounds like Game of Thrones or something, but there may in fact be a type of genetic marker that doesn't just predispose somebody to experiences, but marks them as, because the nature of time is weird in this subject matter, and the nature of reality is obviously weird in this subject matter. It becomes therefore difficult to determine if the individual experience of life in this go around is the only one, or if it's one of many. And when you think about the way that woman was knew my brother on site and was I've been waiting for you, did that suggest that he knew her before, or that there was some sort of precognition of his arrival? We never really got a chance to get into it with her because it was such an unusual and kind of shocking experience when it happened, and I think we were all just happy to get out of the store,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely rings of some sort of horror movie scene, walking into a curio shop and then someone identifying you that you don't know, telling you that this is your thing that you've never owned and take it for free,
And not an inexpensive item. A crystal ball, look them up, are pretty pricey. I mean, you're in the multiple hundreds of dollars at this point. This isn't like she's giving him a keychain, it was.
Yeah. It's just very vivid, almost movie-like in its trope,
One day I'll bring my brother on to tell that story himself, actually, now that I've kind of leaked it. But not to hijack your episode, I just thought,
absolutely,
because we're talking about Mount Shasta's nature, for whatever reason, that Glastonbury story came up. So sorry for the non sequitur.
No, please. And one of the things I've heard positive, I know you mentioned ley lines. One of the things I've heard positive about the place is something to do with the electromagnetic energy. I'm just spitballing here what I've heard. I know nothing about the actual physics of this and if there's any credence to it. But under the mountain, there is just all, you have all this water coming out of the mountain, springs and waterfalls, and the Sacramento headwaters literally spitting out of the mountain. Right? There's all this water churning under the mountain. all the time. Some have posited that this is what is generating all of the anomalous electromagnetic energy around the mountain that can, I don't know, trigger paranormal phenomenon or create the thin place, the weird membrane that is around the place.
I think that there's something there with water. I sincerely mean that. And also, you mentioned kind of the transitional daylight to dusk period. What was the word you used to describe that time of day?
Crepuscular. It's a purple prose word. Yeah, it just means like the twilight hour, I think. Yeah.
That's cool. I mean, I'd not heard that word before, and I've done the show a lot, so you've taught me something there today. And, that's actually bang on. Even in my encounter, it was right when the sky itself was kind of purple, not quite black.
Yeah.
Some stars out, not quite all of them. Sun down, but a little bit of sun still left. Like it was that exact. This was June of 2019, so it was 9 p.m. approximately, right when the sun would have been doing that. And I don't know exactly how the function is arranged or architected, is what I mean to say, but to what extent that like you could hypothesize that these entities are emanating from a overlapping dimension for whatever reason. When there's like a transition from night to day, the thinning of the veil is the way that you hear it talked about. But I do wonder if it's something more understandable if we had the right detection equipment or hypothesis. But there's definitely something that happens during that transitional period.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, it feels like there's, the veil between different realms or world is, possibly lifted during that time period, of transitioning from, the sun to the moon period, kind of in between worlds for a brief window of time.
And I guess in-betweenness is in it of itself symbolic of what I envision the realm from which fairies emanate being like, is kind of in between. And so perhaps when our reality becomes as close to their reality in that magical moment, both at the beginning and end of the day, it's more like if you had a fish and it was in a fish tank and you put it on your kitchen table, it's not going to do very well. But if you put it in a similar substrate, like a glass of water, it'll be okay for a minute. I kind of feel like where they come from, the substrate they live in, there's an ability for them to appear or exist in our substrate, for lack of a better word, around those times. And with water, there's many, and I do mean many, of the people that I have spoken to have sightings directly associated with creeks, waterfalls, other bodies of water.
Yeah.
And I talked to this guy named Tristan, who, when he was 7 years old, he started to have extremely vivid dreams. And he was essentially being transported in his, this is his own telling, so I'm paraphrasing here, but he was going to the other side and he was having full-on visits. In fact, in the fairy reality version of Los Angeles, there might be a mountain there or something instead of a city. Yeah. But what he described as being consistent was the waterways. Essentially saying that if a stream exists in this reality, it more or less exists as is in the other reality in terms of placement and what it's doing. Whereas other parts of that reality might be wholly different. Where we have a tree, they have a building, the river is going to be the fixed point of overlap.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And this is again his own kind of knowledge that he's returning back from these journeys. And I wonder if to what extent that may be true, that the water motion, I always think about when you look at a creek or a river, the creek is always there, but it's never the same water twice.
Right.
So there's something about that maybe that is also representative of the realm from which they emanate, a kind of constantness but impermanence at the same time, like a weird duality,
Yeah.
I don't really know, but a lot of things happen around water, that's for sure.
Yeah, and Mount Shasta, yeah, it's a very aqueous region in terms of the springs and the waterfalls around the mountain, and just all of the springs they just randomly see in the mountain. So
Glastonbury is no different. They have Glastonbury Tor, which is like a big mound from which the spring emanates, and
okay.
That's why the town is there, pretty much.
Yeah.
And weird, like, Ancestry.com fact about me is my last name is Whitehead, James Whitehead. The Whitehead name is like British, and it goes back like way back. I think 17 generations we were able to track it back. And the Whitehead name is also from a tor. There's like this place called Whitehead Tor in the UK, which is similarly a water supply. And in my family's genealogy, many generations of Whiteheads were the keepers of this. Like, you can kind of imagine like a tower built over the spring to protect the source of water. My family used to like a lighthouse keeper style, do that for generations and generations, as be the caretakers of the Whitehead Tor, which is where the name comes from. So that's interesting to me too, as you start to talk about water and the role of aqueous, like spring emanation and stuff. Like, people often say that fairies come from under the ground, or that they are of the earth, and to what extent there's like a water pass through that enables, I guess, like, I don't know, coming up out of the earth or coming from their realm through into ours. I kind of think that water bodies may be like doorways on some level. And so, as we sort of get into some of these details about your reaction, I think what comes up for me right away is that I don't think you would react that way to a pair of headlamps.
No.
And I also don't think that a pair of headlamps are capable of behaving in the way that you described, frankly.
Right, no doubt. So yeah, there's this initial like WTF, like terror of seeing this thing that was, quarter mile up the trail, bobbing, kind of bobbing around, these two orbs bobbing around and then kind of moving quick and out. There's like, whoa, this is weird. Yeah, I should get the heck out of here. Like, clearly, there's this level, my senses felt this level of intimidation and threat by this phenomenon,
I really don't think that would happen if you saw a pair of headlamps. Also, what you're describing does not bring up headlamps in my imagination, because headlamps you can see the light beam, first of all. If it's even remotely dusty in the forest, which it almost always is, or there's particulate matter in the trees, you can see the light beam. You can see where the head is. You can see the beam.
Right, there was no beam. That's a good point.
Exactly.
There was no beam. Yeah, it was just an orb.
The visual misrepresentation of somehow two headlamps like coming in and out of each other, how would that even occur? Like, people would have to be crossing side to side from each other on the trail.
Right, and it was happening at, I don't know, 50 miles an hour. They were probably like 4 or 5 feet to each other, but they were just, pulsing and rushing in and out of each other at a very rapid rate that would exceed the level of human ability to do that, especially on a mountain trail above tree line.
That's a really interesting detail. I'm glad we started talking about how they were moving a little bit more. Were they an appropriate height off the ground for a person, or were they higher up in your recollection?
I'm not sure. They were probably appropriate amount off the ground. Yeah. I mean, especially by the time I started going down the trail and looking behind me and continuing to see them back there and, kind of moving along at a brisk pace in a very terrified fashion. So, yeah, I would say they're probably, I couldn't tell when I initially saw them way up above me. I couldn't tell how far off the ground they were, but definitely when I started going down the mountain, they were, human level on the ground.
Well, also, like, they appeared, and if they were headlamps, you would have seen them from the time that they started to come down.
Exactly. They spontaneously manifested out of nowhere.
And, to kind of like get to where you come out on the bottom of the parking lot, just out of curiosity, I want to make sure I heard this part of the story. About how many minutes or how long from the time you first saw them to the time you made it to the parking lot would you say?
Probably like an hour or an hour and 20 minutes. You know, I was a couple miles up the trail above tree line.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah, I just kept going down the trail like in a quasi pretty terrified fashion. Looked behind me, he's like, "Are they still back there? Okay, keep going, keep going." I don't want to encounter these things.
You would have heard people. You would have heard them moving on the ground.
Yeah.
People do not move quietly through the woods with a headlamp.
Right.
You would have heard their
Yeah.
feet on the earth, and they
Right.
would have been talking.
Exactly.
Hey, Sally, you know, we got to get down. It's dark. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Hey, watch out. You would have heard them say something to each other.
Right,
There's
right.
No two people walking down a mountain in the dark without saying a word. Doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's what I find so interesting about this, and the next encounter that I'll go into is and why I think these things I encountered are, you know, fae, because as far as I understand, they are extremely tricksterish, and kind of they like to mess with people, essentially, like mess with your reality. And so that's kind of where how my interpretation landed that this phenomenon was a fae, because as I got back down to the bottom, and I'm just sitting there, you know, I was like, okay, I'm safe. There's other cars around me, and you know, there's people camping down there nearby, so I'm totally fine now. And I was like waiting for whatever this thing to come out, and it's just two hikers, and immediately got in the car and drove off. So there is this sense of the end experience invalidating the crazy the beginning part of the experience, which seems to comport with the tricksterish element of the fae, you know.
That's absolutely accurate, actually. And I don't know where, you know, you're drawing that from, but you're absolutely accurate. I'm going to tell you something that happened to me, which is so similar in a way to what happened to you. Albeit not orbs. It's this glamour thing where there's these unpeople or people that should not be there for some reason, and it totally does what you're saying, which is it invalidates or causes a schism in what you previously were experiencing, and then it just confuses you, and then and I do think that it's motivated by that tricksterish nature of the fae. But anyway, I was conducting an interview with this guy named Drake, and it was a really hot day, so I had the door to my condo open, and as I started talking with him, he is telling me his story, and he literally gets to the place in his story where he says, I think that frog was a fae. And as he says fae, the words fae leave his mouth. There's this man at my door, bleeding, and he's got the strangest voice. He's like, excuse me. And I jump up and I start talking with him, and he's like, I'm like, what the fuck do you need? Like, what are you doing at my house? I was not happy. And he's like, I need you to come outside and look at my face. As he says this to me, he is distinctly not showing me his face. He's got a hat on, long hair obscuring his face, and he's bleeding from his face down all over his shirt onto the ground floor.
That's what.
I need you to come look at my face, but doesn't look up, doesn't show me his face. He wants me to come outside so he can show me his face. And then I said, I don't know what you need from me, man. Like, I'm swearing at him. And he's like, he says, I just need your help protecting someone from someone right now. And I'm like, I don't want any fucking part of that. Get out of here. Like, and remember, I was like talking on my mic, and all of a sudden this guy's at my open door. He'd come out of the park, across 10, 15 feet of gravel pathway, opened the gate to my patio, come across my patio, and was standing at my open condo door.
Wow.
And I am looking at him, and he's starting to walk away, and he's bleeding everywhere. And as he goes like out into the left and around the corner from my like door, now into my bay window, something like comes over me, and I realize like I'm being really mean to this potentially injured person who needs help. And I sort of say back to the microphone, hey, Drake, I'm gonna go call the police. Like, this guy needs my help. I turn back around and he's not there. And I'm like, what? And so I go outside, and this is all like in the matter of 2.5, 3 seconds that this visual, I'm locked onto this guy. I look back, turn to the mic, look forward, and he's not there. But he should be there because he wasn't moving that fast, and he still had a way to go. So I go outside, I go onto my patio, I look to the left, and right where he should have been You know, like assuming his trajectory remained the same and I had only lost sight of him for 4 to 5 seconds maximum total, where he should have been was 2 French girls with their phone out talking to my neighbor, asking him for directions. And I said, like, where's that guy? And my neighbor didn't know what I was talking about. He said the only people he's seen are these 2 French girls just walk across the grass from in front of my place to ask him directions. And I'm like looking at these French girls like, who the fuck are you 2? Where is that guy? And I'm like, he was bleeding. We were screaming at each other. What do you mean you didn't see or hear this guy? My neighbor had been on his deck because it was a hot day sitting there. And as far as I can determine, this bleeding man was a non-human manifestation of a fae doing some sort of poking or prodding at me to get me to come out on some sort of fairy logic about thresholds and doors and permission and stuff like that. And that he effectively, using glamour, transformed from an individual man who was bleeding everywhere in the fraction of a second into 2 French girls.
Right.
Clever bit of glamour if you think about it, because I can't talk to them. They speak French, and they've got their phone out asking for directions. And then I went, like, I mean, that shit, like fucking split my brain. I was like, what is going on? I went around the corner of the building looking for where he could have gone. Nothing. But there's no way that this man, who's my neighbor, would have missed any of that interaction, which was super confusing because it's like I was yelling with him. He was right there. He's pouring blood.
Yeah, no, and this is really interesting because I definitely had in the third and most close encounter story with these orbs / fae I had at Mount Shasta. I have a similar sort of unverified, another witness that was unable to verify the situation that I was in also.
I remember that from your posting, actually. That's really interesting. And here's the deal sealer. I go back now and I'm thinking to myself still, because this is how confusing this moment is. I'm thinking to myself, I gotta clean up all this fucking blood. And I go and there's no blood anywhere. The blood had never hit the pavement. It didn't exist. But I saw it. I remember distinct, like unmistakable. This wasn't a hallucination. This was blood. And then I was fortunate enough that my microphone had been on when he came to the door. And I do have an audio recording of the conversation that took place at the door.
Of his voice.
And when you hear this person's voice, it is truly unnatural. And everything they say is totally unnatural. Like, who comes to someone's door saying, come out and look at my face while it's bleeding, and doesn't show you their face? Who says, I need you to protect someone from someone right now?
Yeah.
Like, it's such a strange, like almost a proper sentence, almost real language, but something off. There's always something a little bit off.
Yeah.
So when you talk about these 2 people coming down and you feeling like maybe it's just a little bit of a mind fuck from the Fae to throw you off of what you had just experienced, I would say that is absolutely right out of the playbook of these motherfuckers.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a fun a fun sort of I'm kind of tricksterish myself, so I appreciate that sort of I like messing with people, in a fun sort of razzing sort of way. I like messing with like my friends' kids, making them believe stuff that's not real, or tricking them, in fun and jovial sort of way. So I appreciate this sort of sentiment from these beings to their ability to literally when I'm tricking someone, it's literally just through words or something, but to literally trick you through manipulating your perceptions is definitely a next level. And I appreciate that puckish spirit of these beings, for sure. You're definitely puckish in your interactions with them.
Yeah, like Midsummer's Night Dream you're referring to, I believe.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. That's kind of
I do feel that, like, the well played, sir. You know.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's like, oh, yeah, that's definitely some next level tricksterism. I appreciate that. You know, the ability to trick someone to a level where they're doubting their own experience. You know.
Truly, I go like this. I'm like, well played, and then I'm like, can you teach me how to do that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, William, thanks for letting me share that experience with the people that came to my door, or the one guy that came to my door who turned into two people.
Definitely a through line there.
Is it that much different than a pair of orbs turning into two people that then get into a car and drive away? I'm not so certain. Yeah.
Right.
Well, these two French girls had an iPhone, so why wouldn't two fairies on Mount Shasta have a car? If they're able to manipulate perception to that level of detail, and there's so many questions that come up, which maybe as you start to tell your next story, we might get some more insight into, but it's just like, well, what is really happening to me, to you, to others who see these unpeople? Is it a type of glamour? Is an actual reality shift occurring? Is it a perception shift in ourselves that they are initiating through telepathy or something? It's so interesting how it happens. I just don't know.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, I don't think that'll ever be found out unless there was another person with you, possibly. But yeah, you would have to set up a situation in which there'd be an outside observer, which I don't think would be possible because these things are just so random, unless you were like, I don't know, had set up some baiting sort of experiment at a paranormal hotspot or something and had someone in the bushes. I have no idea, possibly, I guess, but maybe it could be done.
One of the things I'm toying with is what is a working hypothesis for demonstrating the existence of another dimension. And maybe these anecdotal sightings or glamour type events are definitely hard to categorize and repeat. I do think that something about objects that are taken and then returned might hold the key. Like there might be a molecular change, a structural change, there may be like a trace of some element that's unknown on an object that went to another dimension and came back.
Yeah, and I think these are tricky kind of subject matters, because I have, watched, the Skinwalker Ranch show, and they're towing millions of dollars of equipment out there with LADAR and lasers, and obviously this ranch is extremely haunted, and these people are like probing it with like the most expensive technological devices, and it's like sort of there, but not really. It's not particularly convincing what they find, but it is sort of manifesting, but it's again not more than 30% convincing. So, and I'm kind of under the opinion of like, let's not probe too much into the magic. And I think personally, the night that I went out and had this third encounter, I intentionally was like, I'm going to leave my phone here in my tent. I'm not going to try to like be the person that tries to like capture something, or video it or get a recording of it. I'm just going out there to have a weird encounter. And I think that definitely, I think it, not definitely, but could have possibly contributed to this thing manifesting. Had I had a phone and had that intention to capture it, this encounter might not have happened. Who knows?
I think there's something to that, and that's a great segue to get to your third part of your story. Just before we do, I'll say again, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. Thanks for intentionally golfing into the sand traps with me so we can get our balls stuck and hack away at trying to hit the hole. I really do like to talk with people, and it's very valuable for me to hear what other people's perspectives are, because no one is an expert on this subject matter. With that said, if you'd be so kind, let's kind of get back onto the mountain. Now, your third experience that you'd like to share, if you could walk us into that, I would be really grateful.
Yeah, so one of the throwaways that I've had throughout these experiences is the way these orbs / fairies moved around. Whenever I saw them, either from a distance or up close in this third encounter, or what I believe to be the sky, they're always moving around in this dragonfly fashion, kind of like zigzaggy, or I don't know, just how a dragonfly would move around, kind of like a figure eight, disorganized figure eight type fashion. So whenever I saw one of these fairy orbs, they would move around like that. And then oftentimes when I'm up in the mountain, I'll look up at the stars, and this is related to this orb dragonfly movement. I look up at the stars, and my eye would just kind of be drawn to a particular star. And when I start looking at that star, it would start moving around in this orb dragon-like fashion. But then I'd stop looking at the star, look at a star next to it, and it would stop moving in that fashion. And then I'd again look at that particular star again, and then it would move around in this orb dragon-like fashion. So I thought that was interesting. Like, are these beings like masquerading as stars up in the sky also? Who knows? But anyways, that was definitely a throwaway to my experience looking up into the sky, on different nights. And that, same thing happened this last night. It was about 3 or 4 in the morning, and again, wasn't on drugs during this encounter, and I am camping right at Panther Meadows campground up on the mountain, which is a sacred meadow to the Wintu tribe. And actually there is a sacred spring there, as a matter of fact, that's very sacred to the Native Americans. And unfortunately, the Native Americans have had a lot of beef with the New Age community there, and them trampling on the actual meadow, and literally sitting in the spring water and stuff. But luckily they've worked with the park rangers to, put a rock crossing little trail across the meadow that you have to stay on. You can just, look at the meadow, don't walk in it, et cetera, et cetera. So it's been restored. So he's camping below the sacred meadow to the Wintu and some other native tribes in that area that I don't know the name of. Called Panther Meadows. And there's a highway that goes to the top of the mountain. You can turn off into this campground parking lot, and then you go up the highway, up a few switchbacks, and then there's kind of like a lookout point that people like to hang out at and, watch the sunset at the mountain. So it was about 3 or 4 in the morning. I was like, okay, I'm just going to go out and, look for stuff, look for paranormal activity. And so I, walk up the highway at, it's about, 3 in the morning. And then as I'm coming up, as where the tree line ends, the road switches back, and then it terminates, a few switchbacks above. I see this orange orb, moving around. Again, it's above Panther Meadows, so above this spring. So again, could be related to the spring and the water sort of connection I was talking about earlier. Moving around, just pure orange, a dark orange, floating around the side of the mountain again in this like dragonfly like way. I'm like, whoa, what the hell is that? I'm interested, but also I'm pretty scared at this point. And as I get closer, as I move up the switchback road, it kind of lands at the top of the road and is just chilling there. And then I, kind of walk back down the switchback road to move away from it. And then it kind of starts flying around again in that dragonfly pattern. And I move closer up the switchback road, and I can kind of see it, just chilling on the road there. And again, I'm kind of playing this weird, I don't know why, I guess I was so scared, kind of cat and mouse game with it. As I would walk away, you would fly around. So I ended up, again, just really terrified, lots of cortisol kind of floating, coursing through my body, sort of careful what you wish for sort of thing. And it's there. I guess when people have been hanging out above at the top of the lookout point at this point, still at this late night, and there was one person that drove past this orb that was land on top of the road up the switchback, and I was like, I literally stopped them, and I was like, they probably thought I was a fucking crazy person. I was like, do you see that orb that you just drove past up there? Like, you had to just drive right past it. You would have seen it, in the road. They're like, what are you talking about? And then they drove off. So I was like, okay. I think this, again, relates to something that manifests in this thing is manifesting in your particular experience, and it might not be something that other people, are seeing in relation to that story that you mentioned of the bloody guy at your house when you're asked, like, oh, did you see that person? Like, no, I didn't see him. So eventually just, kind of playing this funny cat and mouse game, actually got a little bit closer to it. Again, just didn't know what to do, just trying to like talk to it or something. And eventually it was about 100 feet away and it was just chilling on the road there. But it looked like is what I remember. It was about the size of a basketball, and it was composed of these kind of blinking orange lights, look like Christmas lights, like if they were flickering on and off. And then, I was like, okay, I've been doing this kind of game with this orb thing for like, I don't know, an hour, 90 minutes. It's like the sun's about to come up. Like, okay, I'm finally going to approach it. And like, I start moving towards it. As far as I remember, I don't know if it was moving back or what, but it sort of disappeared. The at this point the terror kind of is inflicting a little, on my memory a little bit, but either disappeared or started moving back, or I think as I got closer to it, it sort of all of a sudden, as I got closer to it, a little back up a little bit, there's people parked in cars just camping alongside of this switchback at the top of the mountain. You can just car camp up there. So there's cars that I'm walking past at this, where I'm interacting with this orb. As I got closer and closer to it, all of a sudden I'm standing next to this minivan, that would ostensibly seem to be one of the cars, people just camping in their cars, sleeping in their cars on this, on this road that goes to the top of the mountain. But I'm standing in front of this minivan, and on the side of this minivan is this candelabra with, have you seen like a fake candelabra with just, those lights that are supposed to look like candles that flicker? That's what it was made up of. And I'm just all of a sudden, after having this back and forth cat and mouse game with this, fairy orb thing, I'm standing in front of this fake candelabra that's on the side of this van. And in that moment, I'm like, oh, my brain's I'm like, oh, there's this candelabra here. That's not weird at all. Why? It's not weird that anyone would have a fake candelabra with these pulsing orange fake light candles on it or whatever. In that moment, there was nothing that seemed totally bizarre about that. So I eventually just, went back down, walked back down, way down the road to my campsite. And like, I was like, wow, that was really strange. Like, why did that not seem weird that this orb had turned into this candelabra, so that was definitely a bizarre sort of glamoring experience that's only realized to be glamoring hours or a day after the fact.
That's totally interesting. I wonder, do we glamour ourselves? Is it something they're doing as a trick of perception? Are they actually shape-shifting into that thing?
Right.
Like, I talked to this one guy way back like a couple of years ago, Ezra. He saw this like entity that basically looked like a faceless, toddler-sized thing that was like pearly smooth, didn't have a face, and it was kind of crawling on the ground towards him. And he was looking at it and he was like freaking the F out. And he was with a girl at the time. And I guess she didn't have like as good of eyesight in the dark as he did. So she could tell that he was freaking out, and she could see something, but she couldn't really see what it was. And he was describing it to her, and she was starting to get scared. And so he like turned and he kind of looked at her to comfort her, and he looked back, and instead of the thing, there was a plastic bag.
Yeah.
There's a second part to that story. So he was like 16 when this happened, and he was trying to make out with his girlfriend on the beach. He'd kind of like snuck out of the house, or she had snuck out of the house, and his best friend had driven the three of them, so him, his best friend, and this girl, to the beach. And the Ezra and the girl are down on the beach making out, and the best friend is being a good bro, and he's kind of up in the car waiting. But he had to take a piss, And so he got out to take a piss, and he was kind of like taking a piss and looking for them. And when he was looking for them, he saw the exact same thing, which was a smooth, pearl-colored like baby crawling on the ground. And as he was looking at it, he watched it turn into a plastic bag. And so down at the bottom of the hill was Ezra looking at this thing, and unbeknownst to him, his friend was at the top of the hill looking at the same thing. When he got to the top of the hill, his friend was in the car with all the doors locked, blasting the music and looking pretty freaked out. And they eventually started talking about, like, why are you in here so scared with the doors locked and all the lights on and everything? And he told them, he said, I don't know, I was taking a piss and I saw this thing turn into a plastic bag. And then he was like, holy shit, that's what I just saw down at the bottom of the hill.
Yeah.
You know, I tell you that story because, like, do I think you saw that candelabra? Yes. And I do believe that you might have, like, it might have really been there, something that other people might have been able to see at the time. But was that thing a candelabra moments before? Potentially no. Potentially it was something entirely different moments before. And you know, that aspect of the fairy phenomenon, or the interdimensional or non-human intelligence phenomenon, whatever you want to label it, it's got to be one of the most fascinating aspects of it. The you know, how do they take someone's car keys? The person looks everywhere for them for days, and then all of a sudden the car keys are like right in the middle of the living room floor when they least expect it.
Right.
Are they taking the keys? Are the keys not real to begin with, and so that's just a trick of information manipulation? Fuck, I wish I knew, you know.
Right. Yeah, but I think that's definitely a through line throughout all of this is just the tricksterishness of it. You know, like clearly there's a laugh being had by someone on our behalf. You know, when these situations are happening. You know, because like I imagine if I was on the other side of this thing, if I was this orb or whatever, like clearly they're having some sort of delight, you know, in messing with us and, you know, stopping us in our tracks, you know, to question this, to not probe any further, you know.
I feel that, like, kind of cheeky trickster thing from them. And, like, not exactly nice. Like, I've had stuff that really has fucked me up or scared me, and then it isn't until, like, maybe 5 months later that I can look back on it and go, okay, I still have all my fingers and toes. Like, I'm still alive. Like, they didn't kill me or anything, you know. So, you know, even though I didn't like it when it was happening, I can kind of understand it as, like, funny or not necessarily.
Right. Yeah, you got the joke a little bit.
Yeah, like back to that well played thing, you know, because it's like you're trying to pin the tail on the donkey and they are just spinning you around and around and around and around, and you never get a chance to even go try to pin the tail on the donkey. It's like they don't even let you get that close to understanding. They just keep spinning you around, and you know, you never get a chance to pin the tail on the donkey, like I'm saying, to sound like a broken record there. Sorry for my shit analogies, but it's hard to come up with good analogies for this stuff because, you know, to experience it is to know the feeling of confusion and self-doubt that you are referring to. And I can tell you I've had that feeling many times, so I can hear it and feel it from you as authentic because I know what that's like. It's like a real head scratcher, dude. It's a real head scratcher.
Yeah. Well, you know, and maybe they're, just to pontificate, you know, maybe they are trying to, you know, because they are clearly, you know, meet the definition of magic, you know, trying to instill in us, you know, through these tricksterish scenarios, you know, a sense of magic, you know, because if it had been so clear or black and white, you know, or unconfusing, you know, there wouldn't be that sense of mystery and magic to it. So, you know, maybe there's a little bit of a lesson to be learned there of, you know, life is more magical than, you know, we seem to believe in our, you know, current quote secular world.
I think there's something to that, and it's almost like a Mr. Miyagi kind of situation where if you're trying to teach the subject physics, do you sit them down and show them gravity, you know, text information, or do you just watch the student look in wonder as the leaf falls to the ground and then seize on that moment to teach gravity, you know? It's like, because they have a supernatural set of capabilities and they fundamentally appear to be able to break reality, the nature of these tricks is actually educational and a type of communication, in my opinion. So I agree with what you're saying. I think they are trying to show something, teach something, perhaps like even go so far as to plant the further seed of curiosity for further inquiry into you. You know, and at the same time, I think delighting in the fact that we're confused and we don't quite get it, you know. If you had like an invisibility suit, the jokes you could play on people and you would be laughing and they would, you know. And so these fairies do have a form of like invisibility suit, for lack of a better word.
Right. Yeah,
so
no doubt.
When you're describing this kind of like fake light thing, I think I know what you mean, like a artificial tea light.
Yeah, like a tea light, or I've seen them on like a fake candelabra before. Yeah, it's just orange, and they somehow generated a flickering effect in these light bulbs to make. Yeah, exactly. But they're orange. They're orange, painted orange, and then so this light flicker of the bulb makes it look like a candle.
Yeah, what a weird thing to be on the side of a van at the top of a mountain while everyone's asleep.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I've never seen anyone just drive around with a candelabra on the side of any sort of van for any sort of reason, even if they have like a candelabra company or something. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Like what an odd accessory for your pimped out ride. But
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I actually think like there is a Pimp My Ride where they put a full chandelier in the car, but you know, I might be misremembering. I used to like that show. Another quick thing to just kind of comment on as we go to kind of, you know, gently move towards the conclusion of this conversation. I could certainly talk to you all day, but I like to try to keep the conversations to under 2 hours for myself and for the audience, and out of respect for your time most of all. But when you are talking about this guy driving past who didn't see it, and that you saw him drive right past it, okay, maybe he just wasn't looking hard enough. Or something that I think is that, again, going back to this idea of like predisposition to experiences, if you look into the emerging field of quantum biology, there's, you know, pretty well established scientific knowledge around quantum vision in biological animals. The European robin, for example, has a protein in its eye that allows it to see the quantum entanglement of electrons as they are interacting with the magnetic field of Earth. And so when the robin is opening its eye, it can see the slight pull on electrons with its eye, something that, you know, you would think is only detectable with a quantum detecting or a very sophisticated piece of equipment under controlled laboratory settings.
Right.
This bird is actually using quantum biology to navigate with, and it is seeing the quantum fields with its eyes. Similarly, the human nose has recently been demonstrated to possess quantum listening capability. So rather than a molecule fitting a lock and key, you smell this piece of cinnamon and your brain says, oh, that's cinnamon. They've actually determined that it's dualistic function, where there's a lock and key for the molecule, but more importantly, your nose, and by you know, association, your brain is listening to the frequency of the molecular assemblage of that particle. And so it's actually listening to the kind of or whatever on a quantum level that thing is actually vibrating at. And so essentially the nose is not picking up particles and interpreting them, it is listening to frequency and interpreting it. And so I wonder if certain people through their genetics have, similar to the quantum robin, a type of protein in their eye that allows for the perception of this. Or I wonder if there's kind of like a awakening of some latent function that the paranormal entity class can, through its presence or through some intent on its part, activate something latent that is already there, or I wonder to what extent, they're just physically there and we're just seeing them as normal. But when you get into these situations where like two different people are witnessing one thing and see separate things, or in my case, like where that guy didn't see this bleeding man when he should have, and instead there's two different people there, the lines between all of it become pretty blurred, like which is the function that is responsible for the perception. I guess I just don't know, but I love hearing your story because it really brings up those questions for me yet again, if they haven't already been brought up so many times by people telling me their stories. It's a really cool story.
Yeah, and I'll just finish with one more that is related to my whole, Mount Shasta saga. I was subsequently looking through my pictures that I took around the mountain, and that, the iPhones now take these like live pictures or whatever. And I didn't know, sometimes you don't know when that feature is on. And I was looking through my pictures, and I'd taken a picture from a different point, but of that same area, Panther Meadows area, where I saw this orange orb up close. And I, hold down the picture on the live picture in my photos, and I see this orange orb flying around in the picture in that same dragonfly. Sorry, this time it was a green orb flying or moving around in that live picture. It's like a little video. If someone doesn't know what a live picture is on your iPhone, it's basically like a little mini video that's like a picture. So you can view as a picture, but when you hold it down, it turns into like a mini video that has been recorded. And so, so I saw when I took the picture, I didn't have that green orb in my notice it or see it. I would have saw it. But yeah, it's a similar green orb, but now it's green moving around in this dragonfly fashion. And so this is wild. I subsequently, purchased some postcards of the mountain and the town. They're just regular postcards as they were. Subsequently had this postcard just lying around my house, for 6 months or so. But at some point I picked up the postcard and I was like looking through my stuff, and there was this green orb, pretty large for the postcard, that there was now, I think there was like one or two of them. Now I'll see if I can find it, the postcard, but there's now one or two green orbs on this, like, picture of Mount Shasta at sunset. And I looked on the back of it. It's like, I didn't drop any water on this or anything. And I dropped a little water on the back just to make sure at a different point on the postcard to make sure it wouldn't, that wasn't it, that it wouldn't just bleed through and manifest as green on it or whatever. And it didn't. So that was kind of a similar sort of, I know we call it in the paranormal world like a hitchhiker phenomenon, this thing kind of manifesting after the fact on this souvenir that I brought back. I thought that was interesting and like sort of orb saga.
Those iPhone live photos, I'm not sure why they do it. I think it's like 4 seconds from the time you hit the snap. They film like 2 seconds before and 2 seconds after. I think it's like it's so that if the photo is slightly fuzzy that you took, you can actually, like, using a slider bar, slide through that 4 seconds of video and grab another potentially clearer image from it. But many people have actually caught weird stuff because of that function, because it's not like you're not consciously like engaging a video.
Right. Exactly. That's a good point. Yeah. Again, when I, left out, on to the night I saw the orange orb up close, I consciously did not bring my phone because I was like, I'm not going to be looking to capture or like expose anything, or I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm going to post this on the internet, blah, blah, blah.
I think looking for them is antithetical to experiencing them, as frustrating as that is for everyone involved. And that's maybe the hallmark trickster, like first play in the playbook. You know what I mean? It's like, you think you've got it figured out, you're going to conduct some experiment, and they're absolutely going to not show up for the ball.
Exactly.
But then you're like, I got to clean my ears. I'm just going to go stand on the deck, and next thing you know, there's a dragon in the sky.
Yeah, right.
Something on that level. Well, William, I gotta say, like, I've really appreciated your intellectual nature, the way that you are clearly pragmatic in your approach to your own understanding. I think you said it really well at the beginning of our conversation about the paranormal and occult communities and how they're good to observe from a distance, and that, you know, learning about these knowledge bases is also, I think, rightfully so, best kind of dabbled with a healthy sense of non-immersion. Like, really be crazy about this stuff, get confused and wild about it, but falls short, please, everybody listening, of like joining some sort of new age group because of it. You know, that's where the risk lies, in becoming vulnerable through experience. And many people do experience a real thing, and in their search for answers fall victim to communities, groups, individuals, companies. There's a lot of people trying to predate on the curious. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people trying to predate on experiencers. So, you know, I always say no one knows the answer, and knowledge is good, but especially when it comes to this kind of thing, the paranormal, the esoteric, the occult, whatever you want to label it, just be really mindful that no one actually knows, you know. And
I think that's important. I think that's a super important lesson to take away. Everyone thinks they knows, but no one actually knows, because if they did, you know, it would be widespread, you know, published in the news by now.
Well, yeah, we would be like having the most boring conversation ever if everyone already knew. Instead, we're having a fascinating conversation, which is the name of the show, Fascinating Fae. With that said, what I like to do, William, is I like to ask every single person who comes onto the show the same question as I go to move towards the end of the show. So I'll ask you this question now. I will start by saying there is no correct answer and there's no incorrect answer, because like we just pointed out, no one knows. That said, here's my question for you. What do you think that fairies are, William?
I think fairies are, you know, specifically, well, number one, they're definitely related to the earth and the elements. You know, I don't think many people they might have. I'm not going to discount that, but I think a majority of fairy encounters have happened, you know, in the woods, in nature, you know, etc. So there's definitely a connection between them and, you know, the elements of nature, and they definitely seem to be, to me, anecdotally, subjectively, and, you know, from my intuition, sort of guardians or caretakers of those places, you know, and these nature places, you know, might manifest to us as nature, like we mentioned, but they might be something else, you know, in their dimension. So we might share, you know, a similar overlap in that regard. You know, they seem to be tenders of, you know, flowers and water and kind of, you know, what we would think is cool and aesthetically pleasing, you know, ecological spots or whatever. So that's number one, is I definitely think they're related to the earth in that regard. And they definitely take that seriously. And they definitely seem to be, like we touched on so far a couple of times, have a sense of humor that sometimes, or maybe all the time, can just be on our behalf. You know, kind of pie is in our face in that regard. And they definitely seem fun and sentient and yeah, I don't know, maybe kind of not interested in humans like we are interested in them, but, you know, will interact with us in a sort of fun and aloof way if we want to initiate that.
That's a great answer. I agree with a lot of that, not the least of which is the I don't know part, which is the most honest part of it all. I really do think when people have experienced this, they become more confused, not less. I love hearing about the orbs showing up on the photo in the postcard too. Not the first time I've also heard of post-production manipulation of physical and digital imagery in association with this phenomenon, but we'll save that storytelling for the next time we talk, because I'm sure you'll go on to have additional experiences. My perspective is something was trying to get your attention, and has left you with a similar mystery to myself and to others. And so, for that reason, I can't thank you enough for sharing all of that, just what you think, what you experienced, what you feel. You really were open about all the elements of, your experience from that perspective, and I really do appreciate that. I think it's brave to come on, like I said. So again, just want to, give you those props. What I'll do here is I'll spend maybe just 1 minute doing a brief bit of podcaster housekeeping. And William, I like to always give my guests the final word on the show. So when you sense that I'm done my housekeeping, the final word will be yours as you go to say goodbye to everyone tonight.
Okay.
And so with that said, here's what I'll do. Everybody, thanks a lot for listening tonight. You've been listening to Fascinating Fae. I am your host, Jim. If you have had an encounter or you'd like to be on the show, just shoot me an email at encounters@fascinatingfae.com. And you can also find Fascinating Fae on all of the common socials at that same username. Without any more value that I could possibly add here tonight, I will say that on behalf of all of our human and non-human listeners tuning into Fascinating Fae, super big thanks to William from Austin, Texas, for coming on the show tonight. William, I really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much again, my friend.
Yeah, just to further, I guess, elaborate on your question of what I think the Fae/fairies are. I definitely think they imbue, our environment, with a sense of beauty and aestheticism that we appreciate and that we both participate in. And I think if you want to experience them, I think that is how you sort of open up that portal, is by being in touch with your imagination and your sense of beauty in that you might encounter in nature. And I think that's how they got in contact with me, and I think that's how they get in contact with other people, through those sort of aesthetic experiences. And I think they continue to light up our environment in fun and magical and cool aesthetic ways.
Oh, tonight, the colors in the sky painted us a picture, and when I close my eyes, it's as dark as night, and the pouring rain's outside as we wait for warmer weather. The summer will arrive, and when we wake up in the morning and play the circle game, we're moving along without a warning, that everything will change, and what once was a mountain, it will one day be dust. Tonight, the colors in the sky have painted us a picture, and then I close my eyes only when it's time. They will decide to bloom and blossom, and all the birds of spring. And when we wake up in the morning, the circle game, we're moving along without a warning, and everything will change, and what once was a mountain, it will one day be dust. change, and what once was a mountain, it will one day hit dust. You can hear them sing, you can hear them sing. You can hear them sing.